Hey friend, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here listening to another episode of the Pattern Design Circle podcast. Here we talk all about the ins and outs of designing knit and crochet patterns and running a business that makes it all possible. I'm Jessica, your host, knitting pattern designer, design mentor, and the friend in your ear. Can't wait to dive right in. The Pattern Design Circle podcast is sponsored by the Pattern Design Circle, a membership community for knit and crochet pattern designers that are feeling lost, lonely, or frustrated in their business. It connects you with a supportive community that's always eager to answer your questions and help you through the hard times. And there's loads of resources and activities specifically catered to business and designing. Sound like your jam? Check it out at snickerdoodleknits.com/design-circle. That's snickerdoodle, like the cookie, knits, knits.com/design-circle. All right, let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to the Pattern Design Circle podcast, episode number 13. I am so excited that you are here and that I'm here chatting in your ear. Today we are going to be talking about the 5 top platforms that knit and crochet pattern designers are using to publish their patterns, to sell their patterns into the public. So these are the most commonly used platforms, and we're just going to break them down. We're going to talk about what each one looks like, what the advantages and disadvantages of each one are, and how to make a decision on where you want your patterns. You can absolutely have them in all of the places if you would like, but if you feel that that's not the most efficient use of your time, this podcast will help you gain clarity on what each of the platforms looks like and what is the best fit for your situation. So I do have notes here, especially for the numbers. I have all the fee numbers. This is fees as of today, July 12th, 2022, and that just gave away the fact that I'm actually recording this podcast a little later than I had hoped. So this episode was supposed to be released the 4th of July, and I'm a week late. Anyway, so if you could tell that I'm reading something, it's because I do have notes. So let's just dive right in. The 5 platforms that we're going to talk about are Etsy, Ravelry, Lovecrafts, Payhip, and Ribbler. And then I also do want to talk a little bit about having your own website, because those are the main platforms where we see folks selling patterns and main places you might be wondering. I do also want to put a little asterisk here. You know, this is audio, so it's not written, but whatever the audio equivalent of an asterisk is, you can sell patterns on places like Amazon as well. We don't see a lot of pattern designers talking about it, but just to put that little bug in your ear, little idea in your head, you can keep that in mind as well. But these are platforms that are really catered to patterns for the most part. So anyway, okay, let's just dive in before I get myself into any more trouble saying stuff and then trying to back that up. So let's go ahead and start with Etsy. Etsy is if you're not familiar, they're really focused on handmade products. So there's a lot of handmade stuff. How else do I say this? We're off to a great start, aren't we? Yeah, there's a lot of handmade stuff. There's a lot of crafting kind of stuff being sold on Etsy. So if you sell like the actual product as well, so if you have a shawl pattern and you also sell the shawls, you can sell both of the shawl itself and the pattern on Etsy. You could also do one or the other and not both. And so Etsy is really catered towards folks who value handmade, handcrafted. There's also you can also sell vintage stuff and crafting supplies, so like fabrics and things like that. But it's definitely that kind of niche, where Amazon is a very different niche. So Etsy has the advantage that it does have a very large platform. It has the advantage that there were people here searching for patterns. And so you can get an audience that is already considered what is called a warm audience. They already know what they're looking for. And if you have what they need, then it's a great fit and you don't have to worry about building the whole like no trust factor, all of that kind of thing. So there's definitely some advantages to Etsy. They've also, they're a big company and they've made it easy to create a shop, to create listings. They have a ton of support documents online. There's tons of videos people have made about having an Etsy shop on YouTube. The videos are on YouTube. So there's tons of resources, but of course, that comes with its disadvantages as well. We have a large audience. We also have a lot of competition. And that means that you have to be good with your search engine optimization on Etsy. That is SEO. And what that means is that people are searching certain words when they go onto the platform and they're looking for something. And you want the words in your listing. You can select keywords and things that you want your words to match their words so that when they search those words, your listing comes up, your pattern comes up so that they see that. Because if you have exactly what they need, but it's not showing up in their search results or high enough in their search results, it's not going to get purchased. The other thing that is really important with Etsy is your listing photos. It's important that people can really see what they're going to be purchasing. Part of that is just because of what they're used to seeing on the platform. Etsy is definitely pushed having high quality photos. They also allow you to have videos in your listings so that you could show how to style your design or something like that. The other thing with Etsy being a larger company is that the fees are more expensive. So, and they have a lot of fees. So first of all, you have a 20-cent listing fee that you pay as soon as you make your listing available to the public. That then renews every 4 months if you have it on automatic renewal. If you don't have it on automatic renewal, your listing will no longer be available to the public after it expires. So you pay 20 cents for the listing when you post it. And then every time somebody purchases that item, that pattern, you pay 20 cents again to have it relisted. You also pay 20 cents if nobody has purchased during the 4 months and you want it to auto renew, or you choose to renew it yourself, pay 20 cents then. So that is the listing fee. They have a 6.5% transaction fee. So Etsy is charging you based on how much money the transaction is, 6.5% of that. And then they charge you a payment processing fee of 3% plus 25 cents. That is the US number. It's 3% plus a number for depending on what country the purchase is from. So anyway, there's a lot of fees going into that. But of course, this is, if you're not driving your traffic there, this is an audience that you will be reaching that you want to be reaching otherwise. And they're a warm audience looking for your items. Of course, they also have a great setup as far as reviews and credibility and things like that as a larger company. Another fee, last fee that I want to mention from Etsy is that they have a system where they put it's called offsite ads. So it's like they have ads on Pinterest or Google or anywhere except for Etsy that they are paying for. But if somebody purchases from their ad of your listing somewhere else, you have to pay 15% of that. So 15% of the transaction if they purchase from an offsite ad. So that's another large chunk. So that's Etsy. This is personal opinion, obviously, but I think it's a well-designed website. It's easy to put together. They have a large audience that you can reach via search. You don't have to be sending your own people there, but it is more important to have your keywords nailed down really well and to have good photography, and their fees are higher than the other platforms. All right. Any questions? Do you have any questions about any of this information that I'm sharing with you? Go ahead and send me a message at Pattern Design Circle on Instagram. I'm more than happy to chat more about this. I do have a blog post on my website. The numbers are outdated because I posted it almost a year ago. And so the fees numbers are different. But yes, so let's get into Ravelry. If you are familiar with knit and crochet patterns, purchasing them online, you are likely familiar with Ravelry. Ravelry is a place specifically for knit and crochet patterns. So it makes it really nice because they have a large audience that is very specifically interested in patterns. It's niche. They can search, but there's also a ton of filters available to help folks find exactly what they're looking for. And so if you have exactly what they're looking for, it's easier for them to find your pattern through filters and through search. I and several other folks that I have heard from, designers outside the design circle, other groups I've been in, just designers I've heard chatting in general, find Ravelry isn't the most intuitive platform to use. It's not as easy to set up your shop and get your patterns listed. But once you've done it a couple times, it's also not as difficult. Like you kind of get used to what they're asking. Another really nice advantage of Ravelry is that it's completely free to post your pattern. So where Etsy, they charge you 20 cents to just put your pattern up there to make it available to the public, it's completely free on Ravelry to put it up there. So you're not paying anything on your patterns until you have some money to cover the fees. Now, one huge disadvantage, caveat, whatever you want to call it, is that in 2020, Ravelry made some changes to their website that made the website inaccessible for many folks. There's lots of folks having headaches and migraines and all sorts of issues because of the color and contrast and all sorts of different things of how their website is set up. So in 2020, 2021, there was a lot of folks who quit using Ravelry. That is when PayHip really kind of entered the scene for knit and crochet patterns. We'll talk about PayHip in a bit, but that is definitely something to take into consideration. There are several designers who chose to no longer be on Ravelry. There are several designers who chose to not be solely dependent on Ravelry and created another location where they have their patterns so that they have their patterns in an accessible place for folks who cannot use Ravelry. So just sharing all of that information to help you make an informed decision, depending on what's valuable to you. I will say Ravelry from nearly all of the designers that I've talked with, Ravelry is the primary source of income for pattern designers. And it's true for me. I get the majority of my sales come through Ravelry, even though I do have my patterns listed on Lovecraft's Etsy and my website as well. My patterns haven't always been on Etsy. So I started my business selling chunky hand knits. So I sold the actual hats and headbands and scarves and things like that on Etsy. And when I started designing, I didn't put my patterns in the same shop. So it's been less than a year now that my patterns have actually been in my Etsy shop. So, but yes, Ravelry definitely is a big contributor to the income of pattern designers. They also have a lot of stats out there that are interesting to view if it's something interesting to you on how much money their pattern designers are making and kind of the distribution of incomes and things like that. They put out a summary of all of that information every year, like early in the year, first couple months, I think. So Ravelry, for all of the accessibility issues, Ravelry really seemed to be the preferred platform for pretty much everybody. It's also really nice for the knitters and the crocheters that are using the platform because they have so many different tools specific to knitting and crocheting. They have forums where you can have discussions, so you can have your own group and cultivate your audience there. They also have things like ways to track your projects and make notes so you remember what you did and make notes of what yarns and needles you used and track the yarn that you have and all sorts of things that are very specific to knitters and crocheters that aren't going to be on platforms like Etsy and Amazon. So yes, that is Ravelry in a nutshell, pros, cons. The fees associated with Ravelry are Ravelry charges you a 3.5% transaction fee. And then you also pay the payment processing fee through PayPal. They only are connected to PayPal. And right now, PayPal's payment processing fee, this is specifically the US number, is 3.49%. So basically another 3.5% plus 49 cents. Yeah, so that's Ravelry's fees and what Ravelry is like as a platform. I will say, so just talking about how much you can customize the different sites. Etsy, you can customize kind of what your shop looks like. You can put a banner on your shop. You can reorganize the order of your listings. You can have 3 or 4, I don't remember the actual number, listings at the top of your page to feature those listings. So if you really wanted to promote, say you have some holiday patterns that you want to have at the top of your shop during holiday season, you can do that. With Ravelry, you are able to add some information about yourself on the top of your designer page. It does show a little square of your bio picture, and then you can create collections. That's not what they call them, bundles, that show up above the individual patterns. So if, say, you want to create a bundle of holiday patterns or you want to create a bundle of shawls, that shows up above the individual pattern listings, and that allows folks to, maybe they're specifically looking for a shawl, allows them to look at just your shawl patterns without looking through everything. It does require you to put together the bundles if you want folks to see them. And then you have your individual pattern listings, and you can't change the order or how that looks or things like that. They might have, I think they do have a couple of sort options, but yeah. So Etsy has some customization. Ravelry doesn't have a lot of customization. And then the actual page, neither of them allow you to do a lot of moving around. You can change the order you put your text in as far as the notes section. But other than that, it is as it is. Which does help, from a large platform setting. A customer coming in knows what each listing is going to look like. They don't have to dig for the specific information because they know where to find it. All right, let's move on to Love Crafts. Love Crafts used to be, there was Love Knitting. Now it's all come together under Love Crafts. The site sells yarn, it sells other accessories related to knitting and crocheting, and I think they have other crafts in there as well. And then they also have the patterns. So it is kind of a maybe in between Etsy and Ravelry as far as the kind of audience that is there. They're crafters for sure. It seems to me that they really focus on the yarn side, and then it's like the patterns are there to supplement the yarn purchases. So folks say, I haven't ever seen this actually written out by Love Crafts, but the recommendations that I've heard are to list Love Crafts yarns as a recommended yarn, because then when folks are looking at that yarn, it will recommend your pattern, especially because Love Crafts is trying to sell their yarn. So just a tip there if that's helpful. So Love Crafts does have a large audience that is specifically for crafters, and they do have some filters. It's not nearly as robust as Ravelry, but it is more specific than Etsy because it is more niche than Etsy's audience. Now, Love Crafts, everybody I've talked to, it's not the easiest to use. It's kind of feels a little clunky on the back end trying to put together your pattern listing and things like that. But if you're using Ravelry, you can import a pattern listing from Ravelry into Love Crafts, and then you just have to edit a few things that are specific to Love Crafts. So that, I feel like, is a huge, huge time saver. And just as far as makes it more enjoyable. I don't exactly love creating my listings on Love Crafts, but that makes it a lot easier and more manageable. The one downfall of that is that you do have to have your Ravelry listing already up before you can import it to Love Crafts, and it takes a little while for it to get into Love Crafts, and then it takes a little while for them to approve your listing. So if you have a pattern launch on a certain day and you want it to be available on Love Crafts on that day and on Ravelry at that day and not available before that, you do have to actually set up the listing separately on Love Crafts. Yeah, so Love Crafts does have its audience. It does have people specifically searching. They don't, so it's more like, to me, it feels more like I am just giving my pattern to Love Crafts to sell for me. They don't allow you to set up things like coupons and discount codes, sales, things like that, where Etsy and Ravelry, there's a lot you can do with that sort of thing. And Ravelry is great about, like, they have different options that you can choose. Etsy's probably more customizable, but anyway, there's a lot of options on Etsy and Ravelry for that kind of thing. Love Crafts, there is not. You would just have to change your pattern price. They also don't allow you to link out. So if you're wanting to link to a video or something, they don't let you do that. Couple other pros and cons is that on Love Crafts, I don't remember the day of the month. It's like we're just going to say the 20th. It's like the 20th of the month following your sale that you get paid. So say somebody purchased July 1st, I don't get that money until August 20th. They wait until they have the full month of payments, and then they do their stuff behind the scenes, and then they actually send it to you over like 3 weeks later. So it takes longer to get paid. I do like that Lovecrafts automatically takes the fees out. Etsy also does that. Ravelry does not. So Ravelry sends you your money to your PayPal account immediately. And then, which means you also are paying the PayPal processing fee on the full chunk. Not on, like on each individual listing. Sorry. So it's 3.49% on each listing and 49 cents on each listing. And so anyway, Ravelry, they send you your money at the end of the month. Well, actually the beginning of the next month, the first day of the next month. They send you a bill that you then have to pay your fees. But Lovecrafts takes the fees out automatically, so you don't have to worry about paying them later. All right, now Lovecrafts has a really interesting way of doing fees. They have a fee that applies to all pattern sales, and that is 4% plus, and then it's whatever your currency is, 35 cents or 0.35 euros, 0.35 pounds, $0.35. I don't actually know what 0.35 euros is. Like, we have dollars and cents. I'm sorry, I don't know the other currency names. But so they have that fee, and then after that point, they have a threshold. So for folks who are under the threshold, they don't have to pay the additional fee. So the other fee is 5% selling fee on all sales after the threshold. So the threshold is 30 pounds, 35 euros, or $40. So here in the States, if you make less than $40 in 1 month on Lovecrafts, you only pay the 4% plus the 35 cents on your pattern sales. If you make more than $40, all sales after the $40 have an additional 5% selling fee on top of them. So it's kind of nice. Like it identifies that if you're not making a lot of money, they don't want to keep taking out a lot of that. But once you have more money, they also, it's part of being a business, right? So anyway, that's just something interesting I find about Lovecrafts. Overall, their fees are kind of in the middle. All right, so then let's go ahead and dive into PayHip. Like I mentioned before, PayHip really came onto the scenes for knit and crochet pattern designers when there were all of the issues began on Ravelry with accessibility. PayHip isn't specifically for patterns. It's also not like a website folks are typically searching on. So it's really more about driving your own traffic there. Etsy, Ravelry, and Lovecrafts all have their own audiences. So while you can, of course, drive your own traffic there, you also have their audience that you are pulling from. PayHip, you are sending your traffic there. So it's just like having your own website without having your own website. They do actually now give you it is a website that you have, and on your website it has the whole shop set up. When I was using PayUp, so I tried it out when it first came, when everything went downhill with Ravelry. I did try PayHip out. I found it kind of clunky and difficult to use, but I have heard really, really good things in the last year or so. They made adjustments so your shop is more customizable. The website looks nicer. It's just supposed to be a much more enjoyable experience behind the scenes. So folks are really loving it from what I'm hearing inside of the design circle from the designers there. I do know based on, what I saw while I was using it is that they do take feedback seriously. And so I think they definitely have worked really hard to make it a more enjoyable platform. Their fee structure is also interesting. So you can choose the free version, which charges a 5% transaction fee on all of your purchases, on all of your sales, or you can choose a $29 per month option that charges 2% transaction fee instead. Or you can choose a $99 per month option with 0 transaction fees. So you just pay $99 a month. So really it's a matter there about understanding what your sales are like and what best fits you financially. PayHip, I will say it's really simple to use. And like I mentioned, they have made it so it's quite customizable. I've heard really, really good things. So in my opinion, PayHip is really the alternative to setting up your own website on a place like Squarespace, Wix, WordPress, those kind of websites, where you are, paying an annual or monthly fee. Plus, those places typically also charge for additional fees for selling products. PayHip has just made that simpler. It gives you some customization, but not nearly as much as a website, probably more than Etsy, Ravelry, or Lovecrafts does. And then they have a lot more, they have some different options for your fees. So you can find the option that works best for the money that you're making. So that's PayHip. If you read the blog that I had posted a while back, it probably doesn't sound quite as optimistic about PayHip because I was really frustrated with it. I found it really difficult and annoying to use, just different user errors and trying to edit my shop and things like that. But it sounds to me like, from what I've heard, they've changed a lot of that and it's a lot easier to use. So now, the fifth last platform that we've seen it in crochet pattern designers using is Ribbler, Ribbler. Now, I will say I haven't actually heard designers talking much about this platform. It is still quite new. I think it's maybe around 2 years since they first started it. But it is a really interesting concept. So it's really kind of modernizing how knitters and crocheters are interacting with their patterns. So when somebody purchases a pattern and they want to work through it, they can choose which size they're going to work, and Ribbler will just show them the instruction for that size. So rather than having to deal with all of the parentheses of, several different sizes, figuring out what actually applies to them, all of that kind of stuff, it just shows them the pattern for their size. Also, same with like charts, it makes it a lot more interactive. They're able to click certain things to get tutorials, and I find it really interesting from a modernizing patterns perspective. Now, from a designer perspective, now granted, I should have probably gone onto Ribbler and tried it again before podcasting, but when I set up, I have one pattern available. When I put it in, it was very time consuming and a bit frustrating because you do have to enter the information so that Ribbler knows what is specifically all of these different parts to make it interactive for the audience. Ribbler also is doing some interesting things as incentives for designers. So they now have it so folks can sell handmaids like Etsy on Ribbler. I think it's maybe only knit and crochet still. But then if somebody sells an item, so let's say you made a elephant amigurumi pattern. If somebody else who is on Ribbler then uses that pattern and sells the actual stuffy, the actual amigurumi item, you get a certain amount of money from that sale because you designed the pattern. They also have different things where you can reduce your seller fee through different incentives and things like that. So they're trying to create options that make it less expensive to use, I guess maybe is the best way to put that. It's definitely a new, more modern platform. And I'm sure that because of that, there's a lot more that they're having to work out and things like that. But the main thing for me as a designer was that it takes forever to get a pattern up there. Like I've already created these patterns, and it's not just a matter of putting in the information about the pattern, but it's a matter of copying and pasting the pattern itself into there and then formatting according to what they require and things like that. But, based on the emails that I get from them, it definitely seems like it's growing. They definitely have an audience. I haven't actually heard from anyone who's making money off of Ribbler to know how well it's working or like secrets or things like that. But it is a thing. Part of me is still like really curious about it and like, what if I actually did spend the time to get my patterns up there? The other part of me is like, I don't have the time to put my patterns up there. So that is Ribbler. Ribbler charges for a transaction fee 25 cents plus 4% on each transaction. And then you are paying the Stripe payment processing fees, which are currently 2.9% plus 30 cents. So that is Ribbler. Now, I do want to also just talk about having your own website. Ribbler, Lovecrafts, Ravelry, and Etsy all have their own audience that you get to take advantage of when you post on their website. Payhip and your own website is primarily for sending your own traffic to. You can have SEO integrated into your website. If you have a website, you definitely want to try to integrate SEO. There's a lot to SEO. I'm sure there will be probably a whole series of podcasts at some point talking about SEO. But when you do have SEO integrated, remember that's search engine optimization. It's really talking about keywords on your website. When you have that integrated onto your website, you're more likely to get found on Google, mostly Google from my experience. But just where folks are searching for things, and that can also send sales to you. But primarily, your website and Payhip are where you are sending traffic. Website is going to be, like if you set up a website through Squarespace, WordPress, Wix, any of those places, it's going to be a lot more customizable than any of the others. That also means it's going to be more work than the others. You're setting up, things like an About Me page and a home page, as well as your shop. It is going to be the most expensive if you don't already have a website. Like, you will have to pay the fees of having a website, which can be a sizable amount for a pattern designer. But if you already have the website put together, it can be one of the cheapest options to sell your patterns because you're already paying for that fee. And so now you just have to pay for whatever the fees are associated with your website to get those patterns up there. Yeah, so I think that's mostly what I wanted to say about websites. It's definitely an option. As far as big picture of your business, I definitely recommend having a website. It allows you to have a place where folks can get to know you more. You can send them to your lead magnet. There's all sorts of different reasons to have a website. But with PayHip, that is definitely another option. I don't know how PayHip works as far as search engine optimization when it comes to Google and things like that. But I do see a lot of pattern designers, especially because if their income is not as much as some other industries, let's just put it that way, they'd rather not spend the money to have a website, and they're going the PayHip option instead. So those are the 5 main platforms that I see knit and crochet pattern designers using for publishing their patterns. That's my overview of pros and cons and the nitty-gritty of the fees. Here, let me see. I also have a chart that I can just run through. Oh, sorry, I'm making noise here. Where I can just run through the specifics. So if you didn't take notes, and there's something specific you're looking for, and obviously some of these are subject to opinion, but at the same time, I've heard it from a lot of people as well. So it's not just my opinion. As far as having a place that is easy to set up, Etsy and PayHip are the most straightforward, easy to set up. All of them, except for PayHip, have a built-in audience. It's easy to create discounts and coupon codes on Etsy and Ravelry. Ravelry has the largest variety of filters, the best, arguably, experience for knitters and crocheters trying to find patterns, and the easiest way for you to get matched up with the right person, basically. Like if they're looking for your thing, you're most likely to actually show up on Ravelry. It's free to list the pattern, so that's just putting your pattern up for people to see on all of the platforms except for Etsy. And I forgot to mention this when I was talking about PayHip. PayHip allows for a pay what works pricing option. So you can have, like, basically you put in a minimum price for the pattern. So you could say minimum price is $5. You put a 5+ on PayHip, and it allows folks to pay more than $5 if they'd like. Granted, I haven't had a lot of sales through PayHip. I no longer actually manage my PayHip. I just use my website. But I never had anyone use that option. I don't know statistically how many folks do, but it is an option if that's something that you're really interested in trying out. PayHip is the place for that. And then just to go over what I consider the cons for each place, Etsy, really have to understand SEO, be really good at your keywords on Etsy. Also, photography is really important there. Ravelry, oh goodness, how many things did I miss when I was chatting? Ravelry, one of the main downfalls, I believe, of Ravelry is that there are also a lot of free patterns available on Ravelry. So there are a number of folks using Ravelry that are expecting to only use free patterns. And that can make it really difficult for designers who are actually trying to make an income on their patterns. So you're competing with free patterns, essentially. The other con, of course, to Ravelry was that many people left the site with the accessibility issues. Love crafts. It's clunky to put together, in my opinion. And you have to wait longer to get paid for your sales. PayHip, you have to drive your own traffic there. You don't already have an audience built in. And that's probably mostly it now. This chart is from my blog that I posted. The con that I had listed there was that it's difficult to make the shop aesthetic look professional, but I think that's all changed now. Like I've seen some of the websites some designers have put together and it looks really nice. So, and then Ribbler, the cons, they have a smaller audience than Lovecrafts and Ravelry. And then also you have to fit your patterns into their structure. So it's a lot more time consuming. So there we go. Those are the five platforms: pros, cons, fees. Also a little bit of a chat on the website, like creating your own website. And I hope that was really helpful. It can be so difficult to decide where should I actually put my patterns. I like to truthfully tell designers, from all of my experience, Ravelry is almost always the largest income. So I do encourage folks to be on Ravelry and one other platform. But that is completely your own decision. That is from a financial perspective. I totally understand all of the values and things that are wrapped into that as well. So I would love to hear what you end up deciding. I'd love to hear if this is actually helpful. Go ahead and send me a message at Pattern Design Circle, not podcast, Pattern Design Circle on Instagram. Thanks again for hanging out and chatting with me, and I will see you on the next episode. Wow, thanks so much for listening to this episode. If you found it valuable, please share the podcast with a designer friend. And if you have a minute, leave a review. It's so helpful for me and means the world to me. Chat soon.